Tom and Dawson Matter, welcome to Acquiring Minds.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks, Will.
Good to be here.
You two are brothers and owner-operators of Pro Duct Cleaning. Tom, you decided to buy a business after reaching a point in your career in tech that you realized you might want to try something else. So we're going to get a little of that backstory. Let's start there. Tom, a little background on you to help us understand why you both are sitting in the back room of a warehouse right now.
Sure. I think the story actually goes back even before my career, because we both grew up with a dad who worked for himself for as long as we can remember. From the day I was born, I think he had one W-2 job his whole life for like a couple years, and then went through, he owned a sandwich shop, a hardware store, like all this different stuff. He actually bought the hardware store. So he was maybe an original acquirer.
Uh-huh.
And so we grew up just seeing that and seeing, kind of the freedom, but also the stress and the long hours. But I think we're just kind of entrepreneurial blood. And I worked in tech and it was interesting for a long time. And then I think I just got to a point where there's still some parts of tech that I find very interesting. But it was just this like drive inside that I don't know where, but it was like a burning desire to do my own thing and have some more. Maybe it was just more agency, I think is really what it boils
That
to.
had always been there, Tom, or that came about recently?
It had always been there. I just never quite knew how I was going to get there. Like I knew it. I didn't know how, but I was one day I will have my own thing. I don't know if I'll start it. I don't know if I'll buy it. Buying it never really crossed my mind until relatively recently.
And as a guy in tech, are you a developer?
Not a developer. More of an architect on a sales team.
Okay.
Solutions
All
architect.
Right. So as somebody who is in tech, oftentimes your exposure to entrepreneurship is people who are doing 0 to 1 entrepreneurship in something tech related. And so did that appeal to you ever? Did you ever consider that path and versus the one of buying an existing small business?
I definitely considered starting. I went through the thought process of, what would it look like? How would I do it? What industry would it be in? And I had a lot of ideas, but the risk and the idea of just really starting with nothing and all the work it would take to grow just to step one, it was, and I would have to give up my income in the meantime because I couldn't do both at the same time. I don't think it was just too big of a pill to swallow.
And then how did you learn about this path of ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition? How and when did you learn about it?
I honestly don't remember exactly how I learned about it. Probably just, I don't think there was like an instance where I was like, oh my gosh, this is a new idea to me, because I knew that my dad had bought multiple companies, small businesses, earlier in his life. And so, probably over the last 10 years, I've poked around on biz buy sell here and there, just looking at, what's out there. Never really, I didn't know how to do it though. I didn't know the mechanics of the actual, sale of a business or acquisition of the business. And I think that really started about 2 years ago when my friend Preston Ward told me about your show. Preston tells me about a lot of podcasts, and I was like, well, okay, I'll probably listen to it at some point. About a year later, I actually did. And I was like, this is what I needed. Because now I have examples of people just like me who have done this and it works, and how to finance it and how to buy it. And so that was, I wouldn't have done it well without Acquiring Minds. I really don't know if I would have.
Well, that's music to my ears, Tom. Thanks for saying that. And I'm just thrilled to hear it. Although let's get into your transition a little bit before I feel too happy about it. Great. So, and then of course we were introduced by Jordan Carter of SIG, who also former guest in the pod. So Jordan was also influential, must have been in some way to this journey of yours.
It was really interesting timing, actually. I was pretty serious about my search by the time I met Jordan, given it was a part-time search. So, not as serious as Jordan, where it's just buckling down for 3 years, I think is what it took him.
And by the way, Jordan is also adamant that people not do a part-time search. He is Mr. Full-time Search, actually.
Yes.
But anyway, I digress.
Yes. He has definitely told me that, because I've told him I want to buy another one at some point. He's like, you should just quit and go full-time. I'm like, that's easier to say, and I think we'll get to why that's a little bit harder for me to do. I'll let you get there when you want to, but he moved down the street from me when I was pretty well on my way already.
Okay, great. Yeah, and then you've come to find that he's very immersed in this world.
Very.
Dawson, let's get you in here. What I know you enter the story, I think, a little bit later, but do you want to give any backstory on yourself?
I grew up in Dallas. Same story as Thomas. I watched my dad own his own business, do his own thing for a long time. So I also have that ingrained in me. Our other brother also owns his own business. I went to college in Asheville, North Carolina. And while I was in college, a friend and I started a vending company where we vend shaved ice at downtown Asheville at music festivals, things like that. And then after I got out of college, I started a gutter cleaning company. And I would also install gutter protection on people's homes. I was really a one-man operation with help here and there. But it's something I've always wanted to do. I've already done it before on a smaller scale. It's similar to Thomas. It's just something I always felt that I needed and wanted to do. So,
yeah. And was your vending business and your gutter business, even though they were essentially single person or two people, I guess, in the case of the vending business, would you consider those businesses having been successful? Not
they were successful
multi-million-dollar businesses, but for what they were?
For supporting myself, yes. And I was new. I didn't know what I was doing. I was guerrilla marketing, going door to door. Of course, with the the vending, I had to get a permit from the city. But other than that, they were successful, very simple businesses. Like I said, the permit was probably the most difficult thing I had to do. So but yeah.
Well, going door to door is hard. Although, as Tom made clear, you're actually a pretty gifted salesperson. So maybe that's not so hard for you.
No, well, the thing about gutter cleaning is you can look at someone's house and tell if they need it or not. So
you just knock on the doors that are appropriate.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Tom, back to you. So it's clear that you guys have entrepreneurial DNA from your dad into all three of you brothers. Why now, Tom? You were working in tech. You were feeling how about tech, and how is your career going? Kind of contextualize that for us.
Going well, I would say, for somebody who had a business degree out of college, with no real engineering background. Somehow I made it work pretty well. I don't know, 12, 15 years into the tech world. And for a long time, I thought it was, fascinating. But I think you get to a point, at least at my age, where I'm 38, about to be 39, and you really start thinking, when somebody tells you that you're not young anymore, you're like, oh, wait a second. I only have so much time to do this. And I think that looking at 40 approaching fast really was like, okay, kind of, you got to do something. You can't just have this idea in the back of your head that one day you'll do it anymore. You actually have to make the move and go forward and see what happens.
Great detail that it was kind of a sense of urgency in your own life to make something happen with 40 approaching. Those round numbers tend to motivate us. But do I also hear that tech itself had lost its shine for you?
A lot of the people that I've worked with in tech they are incredibly driven to get to the C-suite or somewhere near it, and I just never really had those aspirations. I very much enjoyed being like an individual contributor.
Okay, great. So you decide with 40 approaching that you need to pursue your entrepreneurial itch. What does your search look like? How do you approach it, Tom?
It was a part-time search, as you mentioned. It started, I think, like so many people, biz buy sell. Get on there, poke around, look at about 500 restaurants for sale with a couple, maybe I don't know about gems, but a couple maybe legitimate businesses here and there. I'm sure there's a lot of legitimate ones, but I think you catch the gist. And then once I started listening to Acquiring Minds and listening and hearing that people are using HubSpot and creating CRMs and like tracking all these really detailed data and calling brokers. And so that's when I started to be like, oh, okay, there's a lot more I can do here to find like a quality business. So that's when I started picking up the phone, and I actually looked. So I was like, how do I get a list of brokers? And I went to the International Business Broker Association, maybe.
IBBA.
IBBA. And so I looked on there, and then there's another one similar to IBBA, and I pulled all the names there, and I just started calling those people. And then I started getting more names. And so I just built my list, and I kept calling and kept emailing. And then one day a broker picked up the phone. He goes, you may want to hear about this little vent hood cleaning business. And I was like,
so your approach was cultivate relationship with brokers approach. And it sounds like it worked. Were brokers pretty receptive to you? I mean, that's ultimately where this lead came from. But in general, would you say it was fruitful time spent?
Overall, yes. The beginning was a little bit rough when people are saying, well, show me proof of funds. We want to see, full cash amount in your bank account. I didn't have, $3 million in cash. And so I was like, how do people get past this stone wall? So I got a friend who does have a very large brokerage account to write me a letter saying he would back me, and he would have. He was fully intending to. And so I actually used that letter to be like, here's the money. Now send me the SIM.
Oh, interesting. And did you have a sense of kind of a net worth threshold they were looking for? Or was it just some sort of assets?
There were several brokers that they wanted to see like cash in the full amount of the deal, which again didn't make sense to me.
Right.
And I don't know if that's common or not, but that was the beginning. I did learn once I figured out, why are they asked? They just want to make sure you're a qualified buyer. And once I understood that, there's a million different ways kind of around that. At the end of the day, you're dealing with a person who has the power to send you the SIM without you showing them a number in a bank account. And
just to be clear, so the audience can shortcut what you had to go through to get the friend, your friend to back you and write you a letter and so on. What was the technique that you eventually landed on that was sufficient to get people to share a SIM with you without demonstrating a huge amount, the vouch letter from your friend?
So I would show them like my account statement from just one of my accounts with, however much money in it that would easily cover the down payment on an SBA loan. And I told them like, look, this is a small business. I would never pay cash for anything that I can finance at a decent rate that's going to return. I'm going to finance the purchase. Here's my down payment. If the business is a good business, the SBA the bank will fund it through the SBA, and you don't have anything to worry about.
Excellent. Okay. So for the audience, it's when prompted for funds, it's here's the money I have to cover the down payment because I plan to acquire this with an SBA loan, which is totally normal sort of response.
Yes.
And what were your search parameters, Tom? What were you looking at size-wise, industry-wise, et cetera?
Yeah, so I started with the, while I didn't take, I guess, Jordan's full-time search, to heart, I did take the open-minded, industry agnostic, anywhere in the country. At least that's how I started. And I was looking for 750 plus EBITDA. Those parameters did change over time. I ended up kind of shifting toward, I want to look for a professional services business because that's more or less what I've been doing to some degree, at least with my position in tech. So I felt that would be something comfortable to me. But on the other side, when I lived in Austin working for another large tech company, on the side, I built furniture. And I think you'll find with people in tech, this happens. It's very interesting to me. A lot of people in tech have hobbies or, just things they enjoy that are very hands-on.
Yeah.
And I think that just comes from sitting in front of a screen for 8 hours. You really feel the need to actually create something tangible.
Sure. Makes sense.
And so as I started looking at more, there was a wood milling business that I looked at briefly. And that was the one that was like, you know what? I think it would actually be really interesting to go do something physical, like whether it's, milling wood or a blue collar service business. So then I opened the search back up in a different direction.
And you guys are in Dallas now. And where you're both from, and when did the geographic criteria tighten to Dallas, or did it?
It never actually tightened to Dallas. There was an HVAC company I looked at in Florida. And this is when I started to think, okay, I need to limit it at least somewhat geographically to somewhere I would want to be. Nothing against Florida. But I went through the thought of, okay, I put all my stuff in a U-Haul. I pull up to, an apartment building in Florida. I get out. There's probably an alligator in the street or something. And I'm just like, that is so foreign to me. I don't know anybody there. I have no support. And that's when I was like, I need it to be somewhere I think that I'm more familiar with. And there's a lot to be said, I think, for running a business in a city that like the back of your hand.
And so when you realized that you didn't want to move to Florida, did that also disqualify everywhere, and that you were then going to look for something in Dallas?
Not necessarily Dallas. I was looking in Texas and South Carolina is kind of where it narrowed down to. And
okay.
This is going to be random, but Wyoming. Because I have
okay. And is that because you know people, or you enjoy those two states, or history in Wyoming?
I have history, and why I wouldn't say grew up there, but semi-grew up in Wyoming.
So South Carolina, Wyoming, and Texas, places that you have connections to. What do you find? Tell us about the business that you found.
So Pro Duct, initially, I was kind of like, this is just another one that I'll look at and throw to the side or disqualify for some reason. Once I started looking at it, what I realized is this is an essential service for restaurants. It's required by fire code. And it's recurring. You have to do this either monthly, quarterly, and then some very infrequent a very small subset of customers are all, annual or biannual. So this is recurring revenue and a required service, or if we don't do our service, you can't run your business. And so I'm like, okay, there's actually probably, a good reason to look at this.
And so Pro Duct Cleaning means you clean what? The hoods of in the kitchens of restaurants? What does the business do? What does an actual service delivery look like?
So I think Dawson would be better equipped to answer that, actually.
It's not just the vent hood. It's the vents, the filters, the kitchen exhaust, and then the upblast fan at the very top. So what our guys do is they go in, the kitchen's shut down. They'll wrap the hood in plastic, and we use sodium hydroxide to lye to help break down the grease and hot water. So our guys will wrap the hoods, they'll get up on the roof, they'll shoot the fan that sucks up the grease-laden air. They'll shoot the fan, they'll shoot the exhaust, and then the guy from the bottom will shoot the whole hood and we'll wipe it down. And that's, it's easy said, but when you watch it be done, it's a very demanding job that can take 4, 5, 6 hours just for a couple of hoods.
And it's nasty.
Oh, wow. And it's multiple people. It's a multi-person job.
Yes. Our guys operate in a crew of 2. So one crew is 2 people. And there are jobs that require 2 crews or sometimes 3, because there's restaurants that have 1 hood all the way up to 8 or 9 hoods. It just depends.
And so it could take a few hours, 2 people. And what do you charge for that roughly? What's the range?
So the range is generally, our minimum is going to be $400, upwards of say $2,000 for 5, 6, 7 hoods, depending on the type of food they cook as well. Very important.
I would say we
And-
average around 550 to 600 a job on average.
Okay, great. And how skilled is this is doing this? And so where I'm going with that is, how hard is it to find people who can or will do this?
It's different. It's at first I was finding it to be difficult. Of course, I didn't really know what I was doing either, or what I was looking for in someone. Because there's not a lot of hood cleaners out there. There's a lot of people that have experienced power washing. But it takes 6 months to a year to actually, in my opinion, really truly understand the job in itself. So I wouldn't say it's easy to find people, but it's not impossible either, because there are people out there.
What you're looking for is, you need somebody who's detail oriented, who can walk in, and clean a Taco Bell or a Michelin star restaurant and do it perfect every time. And you also have to find that person who wants to work from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Right.
So this is Nocturnal, of course.
This is Nocturnal, very Nocturnal. Okay. And then you also have to find somebody who's, that you can put in one of your, expensive vehicles with expensive equipment and trust them to drive it around town and not get in an accident, and then use your very expensive, industrial grade power washing equipment, and not, shoot the people we bought it from. They had an employee sue them because he shot his hand off or shot a hole through his hand with a power washer. So there's, you've got to find people who are, again, detail oriented, careful.
They have to be competent.
Competent. Yeah. They just have to be competent. There's a lot of things that can go wrong in the back of a restaurant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, all sounds like you have to be quite selective, but you don't have the, 4 years of training sort of, or more that, for example, hiring a plumber or somebody in HVAC, for example, would require. You don't have that kind of technical knowledge need.
That is correct. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. And so thank you for the picture of the business. What do the numbers of the business look like? How much revenue was it generating? SDE, employees? Tell us kind of the bullet points.
Yeah. So the finances were, I looked at them and I was like, is this real? I'll guess I'll find out in due diligence, because I was, looking at it, and they were doing about right around 950 in revenue. So just under $1 million. And their SDE was about 525.
Whoa.
So just a massive margin.
Yeah. Although as often in a business like this, if the margins are too high, that's more red flag than green flag. It just doesn't add up. So what was the story?
Flag to me? That was a red flag to me. But once I talked to the seller, she did not seem like she was hiding anything. I feel like I'm a decent, can read people decently, and I had no reason to not believe anything she was saying. And so I went forward and submitted the LOI. But the financial due diligence was the first thing that we did.
And cut to the end here. Are the margins actually that good? And if so, how so? How can that be?
Yeah. Well, the margins, it was real. They didn't have any management besides themselves. It was a husband-wife couple that ran this. And so they didn't have any management. And I knew, coming in, we are not going to run the company this way. So our margins will decrease. I knew that, very quickly. But there was still, today, we've upgraded our, we have a big warehouse now. Previously, they were operating out of a parking lot with like a 400 square foot office that just kind of had they would store their plastic and chemical in there. We've upgraded that. We've upgraded the equipment. We have twice as many employees. And we've maintained, I think our margin last time I looked was last week, still right around 42%. So still a good net margin. Now, as we have not added a management layer. So as we, when we do add I guess it would be our second non-revenue generating position, our margins will probably go down. I'm thinking we'll probably settle around 30%.
Okay. All right. Well, that's starting to get to a place where this all feels reasonable and sustainable and like we would expect. I mean, just for the audience, there is just a force of gravity that brings that causes margins to coalesce around a certain band. I'll call it across small business. I call it low teens to high 20s. So anything below that is pretty tight. Of course, those businesses do exist, particularly low margin businesses, and anything above that are pretty strong margins. So you do still have really strong margins, but they're not freakishly outsized like they were, like they still are, but like they particularly were when you bought the business. But again, this is a business that didn't have proper office space or warehouse space, operating out of a parking lot, no management layer, husband and wife basically doing everything. So it's their job. And hence, when you have that situation, that the margins can get super high. So it is a classic tell in kind of a blue collar business like this with super high margins that basically first thing to look at is what is the owner doing? Typically everything. And this is exhibit A. But that didn't spook you. Because often that can just be like I, business buyer, don't want to be the one to fix all of that. But in fact, no, you said to yourself, we'll take that on. We'll put in a management layer. We'll rent new space. All of these, because you're adding value by doing that. But still, a lot of people just don't want to do it. They want to start with something bigger. How did you think about that? You didn't spook you.
Well, so I looked at it, and when I talked to this, like you just said, I realized, I am buying a job for someone, probably not myself, but I'm buying a job for someone. So after I get off the phone with the seller, I immediately call Dawson and I say, hey, this is the company. He had no idea I was even searching at this point, by the way.
Okay.
he gets a call. I think he was probably at work. He worked at a HVAC company. And I'm like, hey, do you want to be the operations manager for a vent hood cleaning company? And I didn't even describe the job to him or anything. He was just like, yeah, let's do that. So
Dawson, let's hear the other side of that phone call. Why were you such an easy yes? And did you think it was random? And what were you thinking?
Well, I didn't think it was random because it's something we had spoken about in the past before. I don't have any great reason for saying yes, other than I wanted to do it. It sounds exciting. I try not to take anything too seriously, so it sounded like a fun opportunity, a challenging opportunity. So there's no reason to say no. I'll learn something. It's challenging. And
were you an HVAC technician? I mean, had you invested in education in HVAC, or were you on the business side?
It was. I was a technician. I oversaw the operations at the shop for a company who does temporary climates. So we would do propane heat at construction sites, and then air conditioning in retail. When their units would go out, we'd come install temporary solutions. Okay.
That's nice to have your operations manager problem solved from day one, and especially in somebody that you trust, your brother. Tom, was that always going to be your strategy, or was that just a eureka moment in this, looking at this business?
It was not always my strategy, because like I mentioned before, my search was mainly for a professional services business. Which Dawson is incredibly capable in a lot of things, and we probably would have found a way to work together at some point, but it wouldn't have been as easy a transition, I think, for him. So it was not, when I was doing my search, I was not thinking, hey, this is going to be something for me and Dawson all along.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, very much occurred to me as I was looking at Pro Duct Cleaning.
Great. Okay. And now returning to the business. So just its strengths and weaknesses. We've heard the strengths. This business model is not recurring revenue, but strong reoccurring revenue, because it's basically they're paying for a service that there's just regulatory compulsion. They can't operate their restaurant if they're not paying, getting done what you guys sell. So high, you call it high quality of revenue, not quite recurring, but probably a lot of longstanding clients. Yes.
Yes.
So that's
yes, but
okay. Well, we'll get there.
Okay.
And great margins. Anything else about strengths of this business? It was in Dallas, so you didn't have to go anywhere.
Dallas has so the DFW Metroplex is huge. And so you just have, you have almost unlimited potential customers. And when you look at the competition, we have a few, but not that much. There's really just not that much competition out there.
At least the quality competition.
Quality competition.
There's a lot of guys with power washers, but
there's not a lot of guys with a power washer and $2 million of general liability insurance. And that is I'm sure we'll get there, but the insurance for this was not something we expected. I had no idea what we were getting into there.
Okay. Yeah, we will get to that. Okay. So fragmented and low competition, or easy competition, not very professionalized as an industry.
I would put it that way. We have one competitor one to two competitors that I would say are very professional. And that's kind of what we're modeling ish after. Any
other weaknesses to speak of? We heard about this business not being professionalized, very raw. You were going to have to, lean into a lot of putting in management, better processes, et cetera, hiring, or real estate. Anything else not to like about this business?
One thing is we're limited to the times that we can serve a lot of our customers unless we have a key to their business, which on any given day throughout the week can limit the amount of jobs we do, which can be frustrating because we could technically do more jobs if we had entry into their businesses, but that's not always the case. So that's an issue that we run into a lot of the times, is just running into a wall due to that reason.
Every restaurant closes around 10. The service takes 3 to 4 hours. And so if you can't get a key to come after hours, you're very limited to that kind of hot time slot, because the restaurateurs, they don't want to wait around. They want you to show up right when they're about to leave, or right when they're closing down their kitchen.
Yeah. So you have to show up 9:45, call it. But then they leave you there. Assuming you get in before everybody leaves, they'll just leave you there for 4 hours.
Oftentimes, yes. Not all the time.
Tom, what was the idea about quitting or not? We've touched on it with hiring Dawson as your operations leader, but say more.
Where I was working or am working, I was, my W-2 income was considerable. And I, knew that kind of, breaking my search rules and going for a business that I really liked, but at a lower, SDE or EBITDA, that I was not going to be able to maintain any semblance of, the, lifestyle, which is, I don't have an extravagant lifestyle. But it would have been a drastic shift if I would have, quit, or at some point if I couldn't grow the business fast enough. I have savings and I could have, continued for a while, but knowing that Dawson's, like I said, incredibly capable, and I trust him to do the job well. We see the world similarly. So I know that if I say, hey, this is what needs to get done, he's going to do it, and I don't need to. It's going to get done. And so I felt that with Dawson kind of running things and me giving general oversight, I would, it would be a good idea to kind of stay where I was, continue my income, and use some of that personal to buy better equipment, to spruce up our warehouse, to make those initial fixes to the business that needed to be made.
And what else was going to be your role other than putting resources, putting cash into the business? Were you going to have any management? Were you going to be on, how many hours a week, if any, were you envisioning being involved? Is this just something you have on the side, or it's something that you're involved in, or what?
So it was supposed to be on the side. Initially, I was going to take over the office manager role, which is what the couple we bought it from. The wife was the office manager, and the husband was Dawson's current role. And I thought that was going to be perfectly doable because she worked 2 hours a day.
She claimed.
There is no way. There is just no way. Maybe she found a way to do it, but there's no way that I've seen that this could be done in 2 hours a day. I very quickly realized that I was not going to be capable of doing that role and continuing my professional career at the same time. And that is when Dawson's wife volunteered. So we have now I've broken every search rule that there ever was. Don't don't go into business with a partner. Don't go into business with a family. Lower EBITDA than I originally wanted. But you know what? It's working, and it's working really well.
Okay. Well, I want to hear how it's working, because it didn't work. Initially, I know that the transition was rocky. And so we're going to spend some time there. But before we get there, tell us about the terms that you acquired the business for.
Yeah. So, like I said, they were a little bit over $500,000 SDE. We acquired it for 1.75. So whatever that comes out to, right around 3.5. So I felt that it was a fair price. In hindsight, I probably overpaid just a little bit. I probably could have gotten a little better deal. As Jordan says, and I believe this, in short order, that will be a rounding error, and I'm not really worried about it, but it is something that I do think about from time to time.
Okay. And 10% SBA loan, how did that work?
Yeah, so we actually got a 10% seller note, and I actually only put 5% because the SBA, I think it was a relatively recent rule change where the seller equity injection could count for half of the total. So I actually only had to put in 5%.
So they have a 10%. They have a 10% seller note and then a 5% seller standby. No,
the whole thing's on standby for 2 years. The whole seller note.
Okay. Okay. So that gets us to 15%. So the SBA loan was 85%.
Yes.
And so are you guys partners in this business, or is Dawson more an employee, or does Dawson have ownership? Dawson, I could ask you, Dawson, do you have ownership?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
1585.
Yeah. And there's a reason for that specific number.
1585. Okay. And what is can you shed any light on that?
Yes, I can. The reason was we wanted one person to be the PG on the loan, so that we didn't combine our SBA buckets. And what I learned was that you technically you don't have to put a PG under 20%, but banks prefer to see 15. What they said was, if you do 19, it looks like you're trying to skirt a rule. I'm like, well, the rule's the rule.
Yeah.
But that's what they wanted. And so what Dawson and I kind of agreed on was we knew it was going to be a lot of sweat equity for him. 15% was not enough. And so what we've kind of worked out is that after the loan's paid off and we hit a certain EBITDA threshold, his stake will double.
From 15 to 30.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, that's nice alignment there to grow the business. Okay, thank you for that, Tom, or sharing how the deal was structured. Okay, so let's hear about this transition. You say it's going well now. Did it go well from day one?
No, definitely not.
So share with us some of the surprises that you encountered after you took over.
First surprise was one guy quit with 1 day's notice. He told me,
How many employees are there? I don't think I asked.
now we have 9.
There were 6 when we bought it.
And those are including the 2 husband and wife founders?
No, sorry, 6, basically
Technicians.
6 technicians. Yeah.
Okay, 6 technicians and a husband and wife.
Yes.
And one of those 6 technicians quit on day 1, you said, or
Day
day 2?
3. I think it was day 3.
Day 3.
Yeah.
One
Okay,
day.
all right. So there goes 16% of your revenue walking out the door. Pro
Yes.
rata, more or less. All right. Keep going.
So that happens. I am starting to very quickly find out that I cannot physically do both of these jobs at the same time, because I can't be on 2 phone calls at the same time. And there are a lot more phone calls coming in than I was initially led to believe, which is a lot of times a good thing because it's a new client wanting service or current customer wanting to schedule service. I think it was maybe our 5th or 6th day in business. It was the first Saturday, and I get a call that I was just wholly unprepared for. And I get up at 8 on a Saturday, and I have like 11 missed calls on the phone. And I'm like, from the same number. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And then I open the text messages. There's like 20 text messages, and it was just my first experience with an unhappy customer, but they were very unhappy. They'd had to shut down their restaurant because the service the night before, they'd had their wiring wasn't done correctly. And we had told them this in the past. I didn't know at the time, but we had told them, the previous owners had told them, you guys need to fix the wiring or eventually something's going to happen. And it finally happened because we have to move the fans every time we clean them. And if they're not wired correctly through a conduit, eventually the wires will fray and touch and short your motor, your circuit. And that's exactly what happened here. So the restaurant filled up with smoke, and this lady's calling me, and I don't know what happened. I've been in this for 6 days. So I immediately called the husband that we bought it from, and I was like, you have to come meet me up here. And that's just one example of something that was, these kind of phone calls all the time.
I was going to say in the beginning, and even sometimes now, I've had to learn, I should say, that it's not the end of the world. Because at the beginning, it's incredibly stressful. When somebody calls you and they're really upset, it's 7:30 in the morning. I felt like the world was ending, and I've had to learn to cope with that stress. And
it took us a couple of weeks, I would say, to really fully digest that, and I knew this, you can know it, but knowing it and kind of fully processing it and living in it are different. That just because there's one customer complaint does not mean you're going to lose your entire customer base, or just because one employee quits, they're not all going to walk out the door. So it felt very fragile at the beginning, when in reality, it wasn't. In hindsight, we probably should have fired that customer as a customer, not done what I did and give them a credit for the service and continue working with them, because it is our responsibility to clean. It is still their responsibility to maintain their systems.
yeah, we report the problems to them. It's their responsibility, especially with electrical issues. A lot of companies won't serve these restaurants if they have exposed wires or something that could be dangerous or a liability in any way.
We just didn't know.
Yeah.
And part of this too is, you want to avoid the situations you encountered, but I think one thing that may be obvious to the audience but has been left unsaid, the reason for hood cleaning is fire safety. So the point here is that if this stuff isn't cleaned, there's fire hazards. Tom, you gave me some, and so add electricity to that, and it probably compounds the problem.
Yeah. Electricity, water.
Tom, Exactly. Tom, you had given me some stat around fire damage or fire destruction. I think you just said that pretty much every restaurant that burns, this is what it was. Every restaurant that burns down, it's due to vent grease fire.
A lot of them, yes. A very high
Okay.
percentage.
Okay. All right. Which
because
is
once a
why
fire
this is
starts-
regulated and taken so seriously.
Exactly. Yeah. Once a fire starts inside of a duct, especially if it's a long duct, I mean, how do you put that out? It's very difficult or impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. This episode that occurred this Saturday morning, was this also the one, Tom, where the previous owner does in fact show up, you call him to come, and you see that maybe his customer service isn't at the level that you would expect it to be?
Yes.
Can we talk about that?
The understatement of 2024, Will.
Okay, well, let's hear.
Yeah, so I want to preface this that the sellers were first generation Korean, so they're cultural differences, I think, and also just differences in the way you may express yourself. What I learned is that the husband, he's a very nice guy, and he, I think, does care about the customers. Just the way that he shows it is not. It does not come across that way. And he uses some words that probably he thinks are appropriate that are not. So this customer starts, she's just not happy. She had to shut down her restaurant early. There's nobody in there eating. And so he walks in and he immediately is like, you said you had 50 customers in here, but there's nobody in here eating. And she goes, because I had to shut it down. He was like, that's just completely absurd. This is ridiculous. We shouldn't even be here. And I'm just like, hey, this isn't your business anymore. This is now my reputation, my income, my, personal guarantee on a pretty large loan. Let me talk to this customer. And that was, I think, the last time he ever talked to one of our customers. It was, my jaw just about hit the floor.
And did you have any inkling of that going into the purchase? And because you wonder if that had been holding the business back. And so, in fact, in that moment, it's really uncomfortable. And you're like, yo, dude, this is my business now. You're hurting effectively my business, my reputation here. But it might be one of those like, well, I can treat my customers better than this. Maybe maybe there's upside here. Maybe this is showing more potential in the business because I'll be able to provide better customer service pretty easily.
Absolutely.
That was the first thing we ever heard on the first call we had with Esther.
The seller, she told us, and she has a phone presence that is just a demeanor about her. She is so professional, so, soft spoken and kind, but at the same time, very confident in what she's saying. She told us straight up, she was like, this business has a lot of potential. My husband is the limiting factor.
Because of behavior like we just heard.
That would be one of I think a few things. And she was spot on. I think he also didn't trust his employees to do anything. He essentially treated them like delinquent children. To the point where they started this business 12 years ago. And at no point did they ever give their employees gas cards. So he would get a call at like 3 a.m. from, one of his employees say, hey, I'm 50 miles away and we're out of gas. He would get out of bed, drive out there, fill up their van and go home.
Which is what they expected me to do when we took it over. I was like, this is insane. Why am I up at 4 a.m?
It reminded me of your episode with the guy, I think it was the surface coating business in the Northeast, where the guy would get up at, 4 a.m. to do scheduling off of a tape recorder or something.
Yeah. Dan Tagliatella. Yeah. Sure.
But, all of these things were just these are so easy to fix. And it is. We gave our employees gas cards as soon as we could get them, and Dawson's work got, cut down by 20%.
Amazing. This is the art of buying a small business. It's identifying the problems with the business, and if there are problems where a lot of value can be added easily, problem fixed easily, that's what you want. In fact, we talk about there not being the perfect business, so don't wait around for the perfect business. But really, it should be, don't look for a perfect business anyway. Don't look for a business that doesn't have areas for improvement. Look for a business that is doing okay in spite of itself. I love that phrase when it attached to this concept. A business that's doing okay in spite of itself, and the problems with it, the flaws, the weaknesses with it, are easily overcome, so that you can come in as new owners and quickly add value. Which sounds like you guys have. However, we're making it sound easy. It still wasn't easy. So this transition, tell us more about the transition, because it was crazy, right, Tom? Because you and I exchanged some emails while it was happening.
It was good. Yeah. Well, I wanted to, I was, thought I was going to get on here, week 2 in the business and be like, well, everything's going great. It's a breeze. Just no. I was working, I don't know, for the first month to 2, maybe 6 weeks, I was working like 18 hours a day plus. It was brutal. And trying to change mindsets between like, a tech call and an event hood cleaning call, and going back and forth, and then getting calls at midnight from a crew member who whatever, or having to call your customers because one of your crew calls out for some reason that is a horrible reason. Yeah, very dubious. And once Dawson's wife London came in, it took us a little while to train her, and she worked with the seller, the seller, the wife side of the seller to train as well. And within about 2 weeks, she had taken over about 70% of what I was doing. I was still doing invoicing and accounting and things like that. And then I would say another 3 weeks later, she took over the invoicing. So she was running the office just like the wife had been doing before. And
so where has that settled out, Tom? What does your day-to-day look like now? And so, to be absolutely clear, you still got your tech job, which is it a demanding job and a demanding tech job? I mean, how many hours a week are you putting in your W-2?
It's a 40-hour a week job. Some weeks you work 60, other weeks you may work 20. But it evens out. I would say averages out to about 40.
Okay. And so how much are you in Pro Duct?
So now I'm probably, Dawson, I don't know, you probably have a better idea.
2 hours a day?
2 hours a day that he sees, and maybe another, probably 2 to 3 hours a day.
Great. Or is that great? I mean, have you reached stasis? Can you handle this, or do you need to get that further down? Because that's still an additional 10 to 15 hours a week with a day job.
It is. I would say that so we've kind of shifted our mindset a little bit from, we need to be in hyper growth mode. We need to be, pursuing new customers. And now we've hit a point where it's like, hey, why don't we slow down? Let's get all of our, we need to get processes in place and, procedures in place and, actual, guidelines, actual software to run the business. The previous sellers, they've been running about 1,000 to 1,200 active customers on Google Calendar. They were using Google Calendar as CRM. That is not scalable. Don't do that. And when you use Google Calendar as a CRM, everything is in like the notes section. So you go back, you look at these notes for some of these customers. There's, it'll be like, August 13th, 2016, customer called to do this. And it's just line after line after line of that. So it's unstructured. There is no good way that I can find to programmatically transfer that into a real CRM. And so what we've kind of decided is, hey, we're still pursuing new customers, but a higher quality of customer, because the higher quality customers are actually, they're much less work.
Yeah.
Won't complain as much. They don't call back as much. So we're pursuing those while we transition to a real CRM that will be a huge benefit. And it will cut down Dawson's time and London's time spent doing manual tasks by, I'm thinking, at least 40%.
Which right now we both work 12 to 14 hours every day.
Oh,
All day long. Because while we're still slowing down, we still have to keep a certain number every day and each week.
Yeah. We still have an SBA payment to make every month.
We have to be very on top of that.
Dawson, say more. So when you say you're slowing down, so you mean you guys are taking the pedal a little bit off growth, but you still need to meet X number of jobs a week.
Yeah, daily numbers, not necessarily jobs, but each job has a different value. So we're trying to reach a certain number each day. And if we look at Wednesday tomorrow, it's like, oh my God, we have a 5 o'clock slot we need to fill. We have a 9 o'clock slot we need to fill. How do we do that? Because you're at the mercy of these people and what they want, which, can make it difficult. Because it's like, if we have those spots, not only do we not get that revenue, but there's a crew who doesn't get to work that day, which is a whole different aspect. Yeah. They're calling me saying, hey, we're not getting enough hours. Or sometimes they're like, hey, we're getting too many, man. I got to step back. So it's finding a balance. Yeah. But it's a full-time job. Me and London are in here every day, all day. London, first thing almost every morning I wake up to her. Hi, this is London with Pro Duct Cleaning. My alarm clock.
You mean on her cell phone in bed sort of thing? Yes. She's taking calls?
Yes.
Well, so 12 to 14 hours. Now, that sounds like you need yet another employee. Or is that just because you're still in the middle of the transition and things should die down? Or no? Or you just, the volume of the business is such you need yet a third employee?
It's 12 to 14. We have recently set like a hard time. We're like, all right, London, let's go home. Of course, the work could never stop if you don't want it to. There's plenty of work to do. But I would say now that we've kind of gotten in the groove of it and we have our own office, we don't have to work as much. Because before, like we said, our old office was more or less in a parking lot with the 400 square foot actual office inside. But now we're at a centralized location where we keep all of our stuff. So our crews can really run themselves as long as they have everything they need here, which has really helped cut back on the amount of time I have to be out in the field.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, the bank wanted us to do the loan. This was something I didn't expect. They forced us to have a lease to do the loan. They're like, you guys have to have a space. We need to see the lease. We cannot close the loan without it. I signed a lease. We closed the loan. It took 2 months to get a certificate of occupancy so we could turn on electricity in this office. Because the landlords had not submitted plans to the city. So I got to learn all about the commercial real estate permitting process as well, which I was not expecting. And it's hard to describe it. It added so much more work for Dawson by just not having a centralized location where we could all come together and have everything. You can't operate this out of a parking lot efficiently.
No.
Yeah. And so the bank recognized this. The bank saw or had some sense of what the previous quote unquote office was and said, they themselves were like, we're not going to underwrite this business unless you can demonstrate that you're going to fix this from day one.
I think that would be giving the bank a little too much credit, honestly. I think they had a set of guidelines, and there were a few that I was just like, hey, this does not make sense for our business. And this was one where we very well could have continued probably in that spot for a little while. It would have been hard. We didn't need this office, but in hindsight, it was kind of a blessing. They did not foresee this. But it ended up being a blessing that they forced us to do it.
I see. And is there anything from that process of getting a new lease while you're basically negotiating trying to close your transaction? and then turns out the space isn't even ready for 2 months. Is there any takeaway for the audience there, Tom, do you think?
I will answer that with what I should have done was
perfect.
I should have started talking to the we had kind of assumed that we would be able to take over the lease. I was kind of told that by the seller, and I took it at face value. When I actually we were what I thought was 2 weeks away from closing and started talking to the landlord, they were like, "We're selling the building in 8 months, so we're not going to, let you take it over."
Gotcha.
So I would just say, that was, I should have been more diligent on
diligence the space better.
Yeah.
Before we get too far away from it, I want to just circle back around to something, Dawson, you said about the customers having a problem blowing up your phone, how stressful that was initially, but over the weeks and couple of months here. You guys closed when?
August 2nd.
Okay. So coming up on 3 months. Over these last 3 months, you've kind of thickened your skin around that. Is that, one of the things that we hear, a theme of Acquiring Minds is just how different being an owner is, and how stressful it is, and how moments like that one, I assume, can often trigger the infamous fetal position moment where you're like kind of terrified. What have I done? But then what you'll hear is that over time, the owner develops the thicker skin, and they reflect back on some of the early terrifying moments and realize that maybe it was just that they were green to being an owner, and that those moments, similar moments, happen now, a year, 2, 3 years into their ownership, and it just rolls off their back a little bit because they kind of built the muscle. I'm hearing that something is similar has already happened with you guys.
Yes. It takes a lot of discussion between. I was telling Thomas the other day, I was like, I've come to realize, and I was doing a little reading, a lot of it's just fear. It's a lot of it's just fear, and it's not always real. You know what I mean? It's just a feeling that, over time, day by day, I've become less fearful. It just takes a little bit looking inward. Like, why do I feel this way?
Mm-hmm.
I do want to add, I think that a lot of that fear, as Dawson puts it, came from the fact that we inherited, so it was originally 6, very quickly turned to 5 employees, but those 5 employees have been working for this couple for most of them, I think for the full 12 years. And I think the shortest tenure was 7. So, these guys had been operating this way, for a decade. They know this job inside out. They know these customers, they know the equipment, and I've used a power washer 3 times in my life before this.
Mm-hmm.
So we were fairly at the mercy. We felt at the mercy of the people whose paychecks we're signing, which is a very odd.
It's a horrible place to be.
Feeling. And as we've hired our own people and trained them to do the things the way that we like them done, that fear has largely subsided.
Well, it sounds like, so is it that you've mastered your own fear, or that you've actually just strategically defended yourself better, so that if some of your original employees quit, you have other employees that you can lean on, how to hire, how to build a pipeline of folks, or
I think both.
All of the above?
I think both, for sure.
And I think I talked to Thomas and I talked to London about these, the feelings of fear, where they come from. And I've learned a lot of times that's all it is. And people will figure out these like a lot of people call us in these restaurants and they're really upset. And then 2 hours later, they're like, oh, one of our employees figured it out. It's like, well, you know what I mean? And more often than not, I've learned, and this has probably helped with my fear, but I've learned that these are people and they'll probably figure it out. This is not, oftentimes it's not our fault. There are times where it is, but we'll do our best to make it up and get out there and fix it. But, a lot of times it's really not that big of a problem.
Guys, we're going to start wrapping up, but just a little bit more on the relationship with the existing employees and how it kind of created fear. You articulated this dynamic that I've heard before, where as new owner, you almost feel beholden to your employees, even though you're writing the checks. Not a good feeling to have, position to be in. Anything more to say about the dynamic? Did you get along with these employees, or am I reading between the lines that there was also some tension there, that they were not receptive to change or the new leaders?
Well, a lot of it also, I think, came from the fact that we have difficulty communicating with our employees. A lot of them, English is not their first language, and some of them just, don't even know basic English. So we have a couple that can translate for us, and now we've hired English speaking employees, but there were a lot of things at play. I think we were seen as these guys don't know what they're doing, because we didn't know how to clean a hood. I don't know if they thought that we didn't had no idea what was going on. About 2 weeks ago, we had to pull a couple employees aside and say, hey, we know that you're, fudging on your hours. And this is, if you got away with that under the previous ownership, congratulations, but that is not going to fly here. Mm-hmm. And that has not happened again. And as we've, become
Did you have to bring the translator for that conversation?
No, I pulled one of them into the office.
It was the translator.
Yeah, it was the translator.
No, because that person really has you over a barrel. You lose the translator, then you really can't talk to anybody.
Yeah, the good side is most of the guys who just don't speak English, they're actually the guys who I have, give them a key, give them a gas card, give them their schedule, and we don't have to worry about them.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are great.
Okay. And anything more to say about running a nocturnal business, or a business where the service is delivered at night? You've already given a lot of little details about 4 o'clock mornings, 4 in the morning runs to fill the gas, or making sure your guys get in before the restaurant closes, or waking up to 11 voicemails, et cetera. Anything else? Because that's very much a key feature of this business.
Yeah, I'd say it's really forced me to be more prepared than I have had to be in the past, because, of course, when my day ends, everyone else's day starts. So if London and I don't give everyone everything they need, i.e. maybe like a key for our restaurant, an alarm code, any other codes they may need to get on the roof, if they're missing a gas card, then I'm the one getting up at 4 in the morning to deal with those problems. So it's really, really important for London and I end our day to make sure that the teams are prepared to have everything they need, which is incredibly important. Which at first I wasn't doing, and I was getting home at 5 or 6 in the morning, and then I have to make a schedule. I'm pretty much pulling all-nighters, waking up at 1 o'clock the next day, PM, and doing it all over again. So slowly that's come to an end, and I've learned how to avoid that through preparedness.
Dawson, is it one of these, though, where every morning you wake up and you dread what happened the night before?
It's so funny that you asked that.
or not.
That does happen.
Because yes, you said.
Like this morning I woke up, I didn't have a single text on my phone, and I was, very happy. But sometimes I do. But I've had to be less hands-on than the old owner, because we have a centralized location. They have gas cards. They have everything they need in the office. Of course, there's small things like O-rings and stuff, which are expensive, which I hand out myself. I don't want free reign to those. Some of them are 50 cents a piece. But other than that, yeah, less and less every week. I wake up with text messages and problems. So,
yeah. And I've gotten to a point where every time I see Dawson on my caller ID, the first thought through my mind is, oh my gosh, a restaurant that we cleaned finally burned down, or some other horrible disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you feel like you overpaid, or even by a little bit? You had said that, Tom. Now that we've seen inside the business.
The operational due diligence on this was difficult. When I buy my next business, my due diligence will be a lot more thorough, because I now can like see the levers that I can pull. There were just a lot of things in the operations I could have used to negotiate. The lack of a CRM, for example. I am fairly confident I could have negotiated on that.
Vans.
The equipment was, I don't know what a good power washer looks like, and kind of what we ended up with was stuff that we needed to replace. It was causing a lot of problems. It was slowing down jobs.
Just got rid of one right before this.
Yeah.
How much is a power washer? A few grand?
So these are hot water power washers, and you can go get one. You can go to Northern Tool and get one for a few $1,000s, but you're going to run into equipment problems. So we, at the beginning of this, we had all these customer callbacks. They'd call and be like, "There's water all over our kitchen or grease everywhere," and we're just like, "How is this happening?" And Dawson gets a video from one of the employees. He was shooting one of the pressure washers, and what was happening was like O-rings were exploding out of the things and shooting water and grease everywhere. So that was when I was like, we need to fix this problem. I'm going to buy the best quality equipment I can find with long warranties, and we're just not going to worry about that being an issue anymore. And I would say that cut down customer callbacks considerably.
But those power washers are night and day in price and quality.
Yeah. So one of these runs anywhere from, just the machine itself, about $12,000. If you want it, fully installed with, all the other things you kind of need to do it, you're looking at about 15 to 18, depending on the setup. And we've got 3, and we're about to add another one. So that would be something else I could have negotiated on. I just, I didn't know what I didn't know.
And did you just overlook diligencing the equipment altogether, or did you kind of look at it yourself, being not an expert?
We looked at it ourselves, and I just like, how do you due diligence a power washer?
You don't know what you don't know.
I don't know who to,
And what's the answer for the audience, for somebody else looking at a business like this who doesn't know? What would you do? What would you suggest to the audience? Now you know how to do it, so you just do it yourself. But for somebody else out there who doesn't know how to diligence a power washer, find somebody on Craigslist who works in the trade and pay them $50 to come over, or $200 to come over and look at it, or what?
You can look at who makes it, first of all. The company that makes it is very important. You can look at it and see how dirty it is.
I honestly, I don't know.
You have to fire it up, really. Have them turn it on, see if it leaks, see if it squirts water.
I think the only way we'd have really figured that out was by going on a few jobs before we bought the business, which I tried to do. The sellers were not comfortable with that. Luckily for us, $12,000, $15,000, it's a lot of money, but compared to, I think, a lot of the other very capital intensive businesses that have, come on your podcast, that's pocket change to some of them. So it could have been way worse. And I also knew that going in, so I didn't feel a ton of pressure to, like, I knew how much this equipment cost. So it's like, it's not going to be the end of the world if we need to replace some of this.
Okay. Well, 2 last questions, Tom. I think I already said 2 last questions, three questions ago. For both of you, really. So for anybody listening, this is one of these businesses that's so niche-y. Who knew that such a business existed? But it does have a lot of appealing characteristics, some less appealing. I think we've exhaustively explored all of the pros and cons. But what would you net it out for us? Do you think this is an appealing business for some searcher out there, that they should go looking at a duct cleaning business?
Possibly. For some people, it could be a great fit. But I want to be very clear. This is not if you're thinking, hey, I'm looking at HVAC, plumbing, electrical, this is another blue collar similar to that. It's not.
In what way?
So when you need your air conditioning fixed or installed, that's something you want to happen. You want the outcome from that. You need the outcome from that. You need your electrical installed or fixed. You need your plumbing to work. You want it to work. These customers don't necessarily want to clean their vent hoods. They know that they have to, but I don't know. I would say the majority of our customers try to find ways to skirt around it. We'll have customers that call and say, "Hey, just give us the certification sticker, and we'll just pay you for that and call it a day." And we're just like, "No, we're not going to do that." Or customers that we'll call to get them on the schedule, and they'll be like, "Yeah, we're just not going to do it this time," and they'll do that 3 or 4 times, and then expect you to come clean when it's just absolutely filthy for the same price, and complain when you're saying, "Well, we have to raise the price because you didn't service your system for a year." So it is reoccurring revenue, but it's not as easily reoccurring as it doesn't just happen. If that makes
Dawson, what do you think, having worked in a couple of other businesses, kind of in the trades or kind of blue collar?
I think Thomas is pretty right on. Not all of our customers don't want us there. Some do. We get a lot of calls, but it is a necessary service that they have to pay for, which is really interesting because it almost makes our office manager, her job is in some way like a sales job. But she has to call our customers and pitch to them, like, "Hey, it's time to get your kitchen exhaust cleaned," so on and so forth. And, she gets pushed back. It's like a phone sales job, but she's an office manager. It's really interesting, and it requires her to have good people skills and communicate with these people well.
Well, I guess what this means, and Tom, I think you hit on it, is that just because something is mandated by regulation, by law, doesn't mean it's easy revenue, that you're just taking orders all day. You still have to sell, and in some cases twist the arm of your customers. So maybe that, and maybe I think, Tom, even earlier in the conversation when I said high quality of revenue, you were kind of like, is that?
That's exactly what I was referring to. Yeah.
Yeah. So be wary. I guess that there's a real lesson here, that be wary that on paper something seems like, man, revenue that's mandated by regulation, got to be the highest quality revenue. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No, those are still people you're dealing with, and if they can get away with not paying for it,
I mean, they're small business owners, just like we are. Restaurants, but it's still a small business. They still have employees to pay and bills they don't want to pay. As we are more professional than the previous owners, and so we are changing our clientele to be more professional as well. So there are the restaurants out there that say, "Hey, here's a key. Show up every 3 months. We don't want to hear about it. We just want our systems cleaned on a regular schedule, and you better not miss one." And that's the kind of customer that we want and are starting to acquire many more of. And I say I really mean Dawson.
Yeah, a lot of these people there are some that are excited to see us because these restaurants, again, are their businesses. So they're happy to walk in the morning and to see their hood nice and shiny and clean. There are those customers. Yeah. It's not all bad.
Yeah. Well, we could have a whole other conversation about quality of customer. That's often where quality of revenue really comes from, is high quality customers that probably, if you get 25 Taco Bells, that's probably very high quality revenue.
Very.
Yeah.
Yep. And we have a few chains that when we have, keys and alarm codes for those, they're super easy. They're flexible on the schedule. They pay their bills. We can show up anytime. We just, they're corporate, and there's too much at risk for them to start cutting corners. So they absolutely are going to pay for a service like this. They're either corporate or sometimes even better, franchise owners who are, with corporate is checking on them.
Yeah.
So they have to do it. And the other, I would say, subset of that are customers that have strict property managers that, are in the know about this and don't want their buildings burning down.
And then just, Tom, leave us with kind of the financial picture here. So you're basically able to, you're not taking any income for yourself out of this. You've hired Dawson, and I guess in London as well, and you might need to hire somebody else. But just, I guess the question is, what is your investment in the business look like? You're just plowing everything back in, and the fact that you have a W-2 really kind of gives you room to do that. Just trying to get a sense, because most people listening will not do what you're doing. They will become the owner operator. The business will become their sole source of income.
Yes, that is still my intention.
Okay. Those tech golden handcuffs keeping you.
Golden handcuffs.
Cash flow.
It's hard. And if I would have, if I had found a quality business that had, 1.5 to 2 million of EBITDA, or, maybe even 1 million, it would be a different story, and I would not still be working in tech. But I felt that this was a good opportunity for a lot of the reasons that we've talked about. Just so much it was just low hanging fruit hitting me in the face, just everywhere I look. So I'm like, I have to buy this because we can fix it. And I still believe that, and I think it's proven to us every day. We are on track. I don't know if Dawson knows this, but I think we're on track to do about 20% better than the sellers did in our first year, if we can.
Oh, fantastic!
At least, yeah,
fantastic. That's great growth.
Yeah,
we do have to spend one day a week calling, pretty much being debt collectors. So London and I will take time aside one day a week to call our overdue invoices, and that's really important because for some reason it takes a lot of these people a long time to pay us. And we have, I don't know how much we're owed, but
cash flow management. But that's, I think, something that probably a lot of the people you've interviewed have to deal with in some way or another.
Yep. And just, I'm reminded, because thinking about how you collect cash, it's a B2B business, so you're invoicing. If this were a consumer business, you could probably get paid on delivery. But when we say duct cleaning, in your case, you are not doing home duct cleaning. So this is not like previous guest Dominic Blue's business, for example, where you're going into residences and cleaning those HVAC ducts. This is restaurant hood
exhaust
duct cleaning.
And ducts. Yeah, the name of our company is a little bit of a misnomer, but it's what we inherited.
Yeah. Great, guys. Anything else that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask? Tom, you were about to say something about the fact that your background is not the private equity finance background that you'll hear some Acquiring Minds guests have. What are your thoughts on that?
It's not.
And Dawson, please, both of you.
My background in looking at numbers and businesses is from what I learned in undergrad. Accounting 101, managerial accounting, and that was a long time ago. I don't speak fluent finance. I think, initially when I was listening to your podcast, it was a little bit intimidating because I'm like, I don't have the background to go evaluate a business, from a spreadsheet. I know what EBITDA is, and I know, what margins are, and I can read a balance sheet to some degree. It makes sense to me. But listening to so many of your, guests, Jordan would be a great example. He speaks that language.
Yep.
I don't. It made me a little bit uncomfortable, and I didn't say this earlier, but I did say it on the pre-call. I think it was specifically the do you remember his name? He's from Nashville, and he bought a cleaning company that I think transitioned into an apartment turning.
George Vallone.
That was the episode that really, I was like, okay, we can do this.
Because George came from software as well, like you. I think he was software sales also.
Did he? He was.
Yeah. He was SaaS, B2B SaaS sales.
So I was like, similar background. I don't have to be an expert in private equity to understand a business. And there are probably businesses out there that I could not have evaluated, but this one was so simple that I did feel comfortable to. But it was intimidating, and I guess I would say that to maybe listeners who don't come from a finance background. You can do it too. It may be a little more difficult, and you may need a little more help, but that is not, I don't think, a requirement to do this. Having an MBA is not a requirement to do this.
Yeah. And did you prepare a financial model of any kind for the acquisition?
I did. And I am, at heart, I am a STEM guy, I guess.
Yeah.
So numbers, they make sense to me much more than an essay does. While I don't have the education, it does somewhat come naturally to me, and it makes sense and pretty quickly.
Yeah. And on the other side now of your transaction, you just talked about kind of your evolution of how you thought about this before you actually did a transaction. Now you're on the other side and you're operating a small business. Still feel the same, that in fact, basically, how do you reflect back now on being intimidated that you don't have a finance background? Are you didn't need that at all sort of thing? Or not actually? You were right to be intimidated and there was a learning curve.
I don't think there was a reason to be intimidated, but I'm glad that I was. Because it
forced you to treat it seriously.
It did. It pushed me to go learn things that I probably otherwise wouldn't have.
Yeah. Dawson, what are your thoughts on all this?
I mean, obviously, I don't come from a background of finance or tech. So when I listen to your podcast, I don't relate to anybody. But I must say, we are here and we are doing it. So it is possible. My wife, of course, I don't know what her position would be called, but she also doesn't come from either of those backgrounds. And of course, Thomas works a few hours every day and he finances everything. But when it comes to running this business, Pro Duct Cleaning, London and I are here all day, every day doing it. And there's 9 people relying on us. So it's totally possible. I'm really proud of us. We're here, we're doing it. I don't come from those backgrounds. But here we are.
I mean, I think
that's so well said, Dawson. Thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
That I haven't asked Dawson is, and this is not a, how great is Tom, but do you think that you in London could do it without kind of some oversight on the financials and me saying, hey, this, we need to keep an eye on our cash flow and we need to.
No, I think it's important that we all have our roles. But that there's no way we could focus on that too.
I think I would add this as I don't think that Pro Duct will be the last business that I acquire. And I still have, I still do want to go find a professional services business. I'm really glad that we did Pro Duct first. It was a really great, I think, intro 101 onto buying a small business, just because it's a very simple business to run. Great business, very simple. And it has given me could I go, one-man diligence, a, $2 million EBITDA professional service company? No. But even though the industries are totally different, I have a much better idea of what I need to do on a more complex transaction.
If people want to reach out, is there a way that you like them to do that? Guys on LinkedIn or Twitter or email?
I would email us at our main email, and our office manager will direct them to either Dawson or myself. That's info@pdcleaning.com.
pdcleaning.com, as in productcleaning.com. Got it.
That's it.
Tom, Dawson, Matter, thank you guys. Thank you, brothers. Congratulations on buying a business and getting through at least the choppiest part of the transition. Still got a ways to go, but it sounds like life is a little bit less crazy 3 months in and growing at 20%.
It is.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Will.
I hope you enjoyed that interview. Make sure you subscribe to the Acquiring Minds channel below. We are now publishing twice a week, so tons of new interviews and stories to come. Stories that will help you along your own path to acquiring a business.